Maya Carter stepped off the Greyhound bus at Atlanta's downtown station with her palms slick and her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. The August heat pressed against her like a damp quilt, heavy with exhaust-hot asphalt and the faint aroma of fried food from the vendors outside. It had been nearly a decade since she last set foot in Atlanta, and the moment her shoes touched the cracked pavement, she felt something stir inside her, an ache she had been ignoring for years. She had left for Chicago the morning after high school graduation, determined to start fresh somewhere else. She told herself she would never come back. That distance was what she needed. But life doesn't always care about the promises we make. Her grandmother Evelyn was gone now, buried just 2 weeks earlier. Evelyn had raised her, fed her, scolded her, and filled her ears with stories of survival and resilience. She had been the backbone of the Carter family, and now the woman's death had pulled Maya back like a strong tide. The funeral had already passed, but unfinished matters lingered. Family decisions, old wounds, and the question of the Carter house itself. She scanned the crowd spilling out of the station until she spotted her cousin Terence, waving at her from the curb. His tall frame, broad shoulders, and easy smile had always been familiar comforts. He scooped her into a hug before she could say a word. "Girl, you look like Chicago dressed you," he teased, his laugh warm as ever. He grabbed her suitcase before she could protest. "Welcome home." The word home tightened something in her chest. Was Atlanta still her home? She climbed into his old pickup truck, the cracked leather seats sticky in the sun. As they drove, she stared out at the skyline. It was both familiar and strange. Shiny new towers rising, cranes swinging above neighborhoods she once knew by heart. The city wasn't frozen in her memory. It was living, changing, moving forward without her. When they pulled onto Auburn Avenue, Maya felt her throat close. The Carter house stood like a sentinel, the same brick home she had known since childhood, though age weighed heavier on it now. Ivy crawled higher up the walls, paint peeled along the trim, and the porch swing sagged lower, but it still stood proud and steady. Inside, time seemed to fold. The faint smell of lemon cleaner mixed with the ghost of lavender perfume. Evelyn's scent. Family photographs covered the hallway. Stern black and white portraits of ancestors, Polaroids from birthdays, faded snapshots from church picnics, and Evelyn in nearly every frame, smiling like she carried the whole family on her back. Her mother, Lorraine, rushed down the hallway. "Baby!" she whispered before wrapping Maya in a hug so fierce it nearly crushed her ribs. Lorraine's hair carried silver streaks now, her eyes heavier, but her embrace was the same. "I'm glad you came. Mama would have wanted you here." That evening, they gathered at the dining table, plates of fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and candied yams set before them. Food had always been Evelyn's way of binding the family together, and even in her absence, the ritual lived on. They ate, shared stories, laughed, and cried. Lorraine tapped the table with her palm as she spoke. "Your grandma planted us deep in Atlanta soil. Don't matter where we scatter, those roots don't let go." Later, in the small bedroom she had slept in as a child, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. She thought about her life in Chicago, her tidy apartment, her corporate job, the independence she had fought for. But lying in that bed, she wondered if she had built strength or if she had only built distance. Sleep came eventually, bringing with it a dream of Evelyn braiding her hair on the porch, telling her, "Atlanta's more than a city. It's a garden of our people's courage. Don't you ever forget that." The next morning, Maya walked down Auburn Avenue. She passed historic churches and old storefronts, many of them transformed. Where once stood soul food diners and mom-and-pop shops, now sat yoga studios and trendy coffee houses. Luxury condos loomed where small businesses once thrived. The scent of espresso floated in the air where fried catfish used to dominate. Yet pieces of the old remained. She stopped at a mural painted across a brick wall, portraits of black leaders, fists raised high. At the bottom, in bold white letters, red we still rise. Maya reached out, touching the paint with her fingers. Something stirred inside her chest. Later, Terence took her driving through the city. He pointed out changes, told her about his landscaping business. He hustled daily, mowing lawns and trimming hedges, dreaming of expanding enough to hire young men before the streets swallowed them. "It's hard, you know," he said, eyes fixed on the road. "System don't make it easy. But I can't let these boys think they worth nothing. Somebody's got to help them plant something real." Maya admired him. Terence wasn't just holding on to roots. He was planting new ones every day. That weekend, the Carter family gathered in the living room for what Evelyn used to call family meetings. She had believed in airing grievances and facing problems head-on. This meeting carried heavier weight than any before. Uncle James cleared his throat. "We got to decide what to do with Mama's house." The room grew quiet. Everyone knew developers had been circling. The land was worth more than most of them could dream. Selling could mean paying off debts, sending kids to college, or breathing easier for the first time in years. Lorraine shook her head immediately. Selling it would break Mama's heart. This house is history. Terence leaned forward. "We could fix it up, make it a cultural center, a place for the community, keep the legacy alive." But Cousin Denise spoke sharply. "Easy for y'all to say. Some of us drowning. That money could change lives. Mama wouldn't want us to struggle like this." Voices rose, emotions boiled. Some argued for financial freedom, others for protecting the family legacy. Maya stayed quiet, torn between both sides. She understood the temptation of money, but Evelyn's voice echoed in her mind. The house wasn't just wood and nails. It was roots, and roots couldn't be sold. That night, unable to sleep, Maya walked to the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historical Park. She studied the photographs of marches, arrests, speeches. She felt the weight of footsteps that had walked these streets before her. Outside, she overheard a tour guide tell a group of students, "The fight for justice didn't end in the 60s. It continues every day in every community." Maya carried those words home like a stone in her pocket. A few days later, she met Jasmine, her childhood friend who now ran a nonprofit for mentoring young girls. They sat in a coffee shop that used to be a record store, sipping lattes. Jasmine's eyes were sharp with conviction. "I stayed because I had to. These girls need someone to believe in them. We can't all run. Somebody's got to keep building." Maya swallowed the guilt rising in her throat. She had built a career in Chicago, but what had she given back to Atlanta? At the next family meeting, when voices clashed again, Maya finally spoke. "Grandma's house shouldn't be sold. We should turn it into something that honors her. A place where kids can learn our history, where families can come together, where the roots don't get erased." The room fell silent. Her words landed heavy. She could almost feel Evelyn's presence in the room, steady, approving. After long hours of debate, the family voted. The house would stay. Maya didn't realize then that her life had shifted. She had come to Atlanta planning to stay only a few weeks. But as she looked around at her family, she knew she wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was stepping back into the soil that had always been hers. The decision had been made, and once it was spoken aloud, it felt irreversible. The Carter house would not be sold. It would remain in the family and become something larger than just a home. It would become a place of gathering, learning, and legacy. But the moment the vote was cast, reality sank in. Keeping the house was one thing. Repairing and restoring it was another. Years of weather and neglect had worn it down. The roof leaked, the floors creaked, the walls held cracks like scars, and none of them had the kind of money that renovations required. Terence, ever the optimist, slapped his palms together. "All right then, if we're going to do this, let's do it. I know some brothers who can help us on weekends. We'll figure it out." His voice carried the conviction of someone who had worked with little for most of his life. Maya, sitting quietly on the couch, felt something spark inside her. She had left Atlanta to escape responsibility, but here it was again, demanding her presence. She realized she didn't want to run this time. The first Saturday they gathered at the house, the place seemed to resist their efforts. Dust coated everything. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the stench of mildew rose as soon as they pried open old closets. The air was thick with the weight of Evelyn's absence. But Lorraine walked from room to room, wiping her eyes and saying, "Mama's here with us. She wouldn't let this house die." Neighbors stopped by that first day, some curious, some eager to help. Mrs. Jenkins from down the street brought lemonade and biscuits, shaking her head at the peeling paint. "Your grandma fed half this block back in the day. Y'all doing right by her." The work was grueling. They tore up rotting floorboards, patched holes in the roof, and scrubbed layers of grime that clung like history itself. Maya's hands blistered from scraping paint. Her back ached from hauling trash. But with each swing of a hammer and sweep of a broom, she felt herself sinking deeper into belonging. Sweat dripped into her eyes, but instead of resenting the labor, she found herself smiling. At night, she dreamed of Evelyn. Sometimes Evelyn was young, marching with other protesters, her voice raised in songs of freedom. Sometimes she was older, stirring pots of gumbo and telling children to mind their manners. These dreams didn't feel like simple memories. They felt like messages, as if Evelyn was reminding her that every act of restoration was also an act of resistance. The family faced obstacles at every turn. Termites had eaten through sections of the wood, the plumbing was outdated, and a storm one night blew shingles from the half-repaired roof. Money was tighter than ever. Denise, who had originally wanted to sell, grumbled that they had bitten off more than they could chew. But even she showed up with gloves on, helping scrub windows and paint walls. "If we're doing this," she said grudgingly, "we might as well do it right." Maya tapped into skills she didn't know she had. At work in Chicago, she had written grant proposals and managed budgets for corporate projects. Here, she used those same skills to draft applications for community funding, reaching out to local organizations and historical societies. Jasmine connected her with people who were eager to support. Checks were small at first, but every dollar stretched. Slowly, hope replaced despair. Atlanta itself wrapped around Maya as she stayed longer. She found herself falling back in love with the rhythm of the city, the music drifting from passing cars, the smell of barbecue smoke hanging over street corners, the blend of old and new colliding on every block. She spent evenings walking through neighborhoods, watching kids play basketball under yellow streetlights, listening to elders tell stories on porches. Everywhere she turned, she found reminders of why this city mattered. It wasn't perfect. Poverty and struggle still weighed heavy, but it was alive, resilient. One afternoon, while painting the porch, Maya overheard Terrence talking to some of the teenagers he had hired from the neighborhood. "This ain't just work," he told them, his voice carrying steady authority. "This house gone be yours too. A place you can come when the world tries to tell you you don't belong. So do it with pride." The boys nodded, their faces shining with sweat, hammers in their hands. That night, sitting on the porch swing, Maya looked out at Auburn Avenue. The mural she had touched days earlier was visible in the distance, glowing faintly under a street lamp. She thought about Evelyn's stories of marching and singing, of facing down fear with faith. She whispered into the warm night air, "We're keeping the roots, Grandma. I promise." The renovation dragged on for months. Some days it felt impossible. Arguments flared between family members over money, over design choices, over exhaustion. But beneath the frustration was an unspoken unity. Each nail hammered into wood, each stroke of paint, each dollar raised was a thread binding them closer together. Maya began to feel the weight of her own transformation. In Chicago, she had always carried a certain emptiness, even when she succeeded. Here, covered in sweat and paint, she felt fuller. She realized she hadn't just come back for Evelyn's funeral. She had come back for herself. As the Carter Cultural House took shape, word spread. More volunteers arrived, college students, retired carpenters, church members, neighbors who remembered Evelyn's kindness. Donations trickled in, sometimes in envelopes stuffed with small bills, sometimes in supplies dropped off by local businesses. A retired electrician fixed the wiring for free. A group of church ladies sewed curtains. A local artist painted a mural inside depicting Evelyn with children gathered at her feet, her face strong and kind. Flashbacks of Evelyn grew sharper. Lorraine told stories of her mother hiding protesters in the basement during marches. James recalled how Evelyn had stood up to a landlord trying to cheat them. Denise remembered being dragged to church every Sunday and being told, "You better sing like your life depends on it." Each story layered the house with more meaning. Finally, after months of sweat and setbacks, the house stood renewed. The porch gleamed with fresh paint, the roof shone with new shingles, the walls inside were bright and welcoming. The Carter family decided on an opening day. Flyers went out, neighbors spread the word, and anticipation filled the air. On the morning of the opening, Maya woke before sunrise. She dressed simply, but her hands trembled as she laced her shoes. Walking through the house, she felt Evelyn's presence in every corner. The smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, the hum of voices gathering outside, the swing creaking on the porch, all of it felt alive with history. By noon, the yard was full. Children raced around, their laughter ringing. Elders sat on the porch sharing stories. Music filled the air, gospel, jazz, hip-hop blending together in celebration. The mural of Evelyn drew people in, and some wept when they saw it. Lorraine stood by the door, greeting each visitor like family. Maya stood back watching. The sight brought tears to her eyes. This was more than a house. It was a vessel of memory, a beacon of pride, a promise to the future. She realized she had not only come home, she had found her purpose. As the sun set, painting the sky in purples and oranges, Maya stepped onto the porch. The Atlantis skyline shimmered in the distance, alive and bright. She whispered softly, "We did it, Grandma. Your roots are still here." For the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. Atlanta wasn't just her past. It was her present and her future. The roots that Evelyn had planted ran through her too, strong and unbroken. She had only needed to come back and water them. Thanks for watching.